I think most writers struggle with that issue of trying to write clean and then, but yeah, no, what Howard told me, and he's written about this before in his newsletter, was always the fastest writing is the best writing.
You hear all the bull about marketing every day. Make your money in your sleep. My new offer is crushing it. My guru could beat up your guru. It's time to go right to the source and get the truth about marketing. With your host, the founder of copychief.com, Kevin Rogers.
Hey, welcome back to The Truth About Marketing. It's Kev Rogers here. This is the show where we go deep with the people who are actually doing the stuff that makes the money, to find out what they did, why they did it, how they did it, and get some creative light bulbs going off in our heads about how we can market better ourselves. My guest today is a guy I've been wanting to have on the show for quite a long time, since it started, actually. We finally got our schedules together to make it happen. He's a very busy copywriter. He's something of a legend in the industry, and you'll hear all the reasons why in just a moment. He's also a course creator. One of the most talked about and most revered copywriting courses in the industry belongs to Scott Haines. So, Scott, thanks for being here today, bro.
Thanks, Kevin.
It's going to be a lot of fun, man. I want to go back to when you were a kid. Do you remember the first time you wrote something that got a reaction from somebody?
Going back to a kid, huh?
Or just any time in your life. You might have been an adult, but like first time you wrote something and it got some reaction back from people and you went, this is kind of cool.
Yeah, I mean, I would skip forward to getting into direct marketing because that's probably, I don't know if that's the first, I mean, other than in college or something, I wrote an essay, and the teacher was thrilled with it or something like that. I really don't count that. Going back about 20 years and just starting to I learned about direct response and I thought, hey, this might be pretty cool to do. And I started out, believe it or not, writing classified ads for myself. For some projects, I either, begged, borrowed, or whatever the rights to resell. Information marketing. That's that's going way, way back. And I really stunk at it. is the answer to that. But I got better, and I kept doing little things like that. And I remember I got the rights to, I had forgotten all about this. Thanks for this question, by the way. I got the rights to a report, and I can't remember exactly what it was, some kind of information report. And I ran a classified ad. I'd been trying things for a while, and I made a profit. Not much of a profit, but I did through a classified ad. And that was kind of maybe the first time I was like, maybe this is possible.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah. So you had the double whammy. You started writing stuff. Look, a good or bad reaction is a reaction, right?
Right.
The fact that you stuck with it and got better means you were a pro out of the gate, right? Because that's one of the qualifiers right there. I mean, no writer that you or I know ever ran scared when something didn't work. It might have stung a little, but the instinct is, all right, now I'll figure this out. I'm not done here yet at all. Like, we're just getting started, right?
Absolutely. I mean, that was my, I didn't give up. I mean, or I didn't want to give up. I found this thing and I knew people were doing it successfully. Mm-hmm. And I thought I didn't really have anything else to do. I mean, I was in college, that whole deal, that's fine. But there was no reason not to keep trying.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you had the other part of it, then it actually produced a profit, right? And so.
Sure. In that whole period, just real quick, about the first 2 years after I learned about direct response, that whole period was that those types of things, running things, trying to do my own thing, trying and failing. I failed way more than I succeeded, if you can call it success. But I learned a lot. So it was a couple of years of just a side, but I treated it with more reverence than a side project. But that's it. It was a while.
And what were you thinking you would do after college? What was your major?
I didn't have one going in, and actually, how this all came about is I thought about getting a marketing degree. After I discovered direct response or direct marketing, I thought, well, maybe I'll get a marketing degree. And I went, and on one of the assignments, I had to go see one of the professors, the head of the department, and he asked me what my goals were, or what I intended for, my marketing degree. I said, well, really, I want to get it so I can run my own projects or business. And he kind of sat back and laughed at me. And that was it, because I was already making a little bit of money, and I knew it was possible. He was basically telling me, "Oh, you've got to go to the corporate deal. Yeah. You got to work for 15 years, and then maybe, and that whole skit or whatever it is."
Yeah.
I just disregarded that, and I was out of college within a half a year after that, I guess. Right. So I stopped short of any kind of degree. I've got all my basics, but I didn't specialize in anything.
Yeah, true entrepreneur goes, yeah, maybe not this path. This one where all the stones are already decided in how I should walk across them.
Right, and I knew he wasn't telling the truth because there were examples.
Yeah,
see the examples out there, and it's way more prevalent now. You'll with the internet and everything, you'll see people doing well. You don't need more proof.
So 20 years in the gig, and then you moved into freelancing. You worked for a very long time with and under the close watch and tutelage of the great Gary Halbert. You've written for Jay Abraham, Robert Allen, Joe Polish, John Carlton, Rich Schefren, Matt Fury. Wow. And, Early to Rise back when Mark Ford ran it, and even Trump University, which is an interesting note on the resume at this time in history.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll tell you about that in a bit if you want me to.
Yeah, let's hear it now. What was that like?
I got hired by Trump University through a company that was doing the promotions for it, for the front end and the coaching in the back end. And I wrote, it's probably one of the most successful pieces I ever wrote. And the interesting thing is I wrote it in just a couple of days. That's another thing. If we had the time, we could talk about speed and writing speed, because I've had some interesting results. Most of my stuff that's been the most successful, I wrote the fastest. Not all of it, but most of it, which is counterintuitive.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, the Trump University, that ran online for about 5 years in Google Ads.
Wow.
Right up at the top. It was really successful before they, the coaching part got them in trouble and they went downhill.
Right. And so any notes back from the Donald himself, or how many layers were there between?
I got a 6, after I wrote the ad, thankfully I wrote it pretty clean. I got a 6-page, here's what you can't say document after the fact.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
It's always good to have after. Yeah. For draft 2, here's all the rules.
Yeah, I was compliant with all of it. I never you couldn't call him the Donald, things like that. Anything derogatory, which is understandable. Yeah. But that came to me after like I said, thankfully what I written was fine. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. Cool. So, let's talk about Halbert a little bit, because why wouldn't we, right? You're one of the very few people on the planet who had the privilege to work with Gary, and anybody who studies Gary knows that, the relationships he kept were very special to him, very important to him, and were typically long-term. And so I'd love to get your take on, also, it's worth noting that Gary's son Bond says that you write more like Gary than any other copywriter working today. And I know that you spoke with Gary on the phone nearly every day. So tell me, what were those conversations like when you and Gary were on the phone?
Really, and a lot of them weren't about, marketing or anything like that. After a while, and there was a grace period of quite a while, and then we eventually, when I first started working with him, where I was just what Gary calls a shit weasel for a long time. I've done every awful chore you can imagine, often with not enough money to complete it for some reason. Just it was insane. But our conversations morphed into more just life and stuff like that after a while. Less about marketing, unless we were working on something together, or I had a question for him, or he wanted me. I was going to say he had a question for me, but he often didn't have a question for me. It was usually, hey, I'm going to read this to you. And then that was it. It was kind of a dictatorial type. Actually, he asked me questions from time to time. But yeah, so.
Interesting. Now, so how does the relationship start? Was it, like you say, you kind of had to work your way out of shit weasel status? So, like, what were the rules going in? Was Gary very definitive about how this was going to work in the beginning?
No. Maybe if I can just really quick shortcut this, how I even got involved with him.
Sure, yeah.
Because it's a lesson. I mean, people have done this, taken this up over the years really well. But I had no idea. He wasn't really even doing business for a period of time. For whatever reason, he had moved from Key West and moved up to Florida, Miami. And all I wanted to do was subscribe to his newsletter, but I had no contact information. So I got the contact information somehow, maybe through Dan Kennedy's office, if I'm remembering correctly. And I wrote him a letter and just said, hey, I want to subscribe. And he sent me, actually Teresa, his longtime assistant, I didn't know this, sent me the Max Money book. And then I subscribed to his newsletter. And I ended up writing him a handwritten letter, because all I had was a typewriter. And I could type, but I make too many mistakes for a typewriter. Mm-hmm. And I wrote him a handwritten letter and just said, hey, I want to get your products. And he called me up after that, after about a month and a half. I didn't expect to hear anything anyway, and said, hey, why don't you come down to Florida and pick them up, yourself.
Wow.
And I immediately quit my job, which was not that big a deal. It wasn't really, I think I was doing construction at the time in the summer, so that wasn't hard to do. And I drove to Florida, and he gave me an assignment, and I'd gotten good enough on my own by then that he hired me for, I think, 10 cents a week or something, whatever he was paying me. And that's kind of the start of it.
Wow. So was it a partnership like, I'll share some royalty with you on this if it goes, or was it literally like you're an apprentice, and
yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Apprentice at first, for sure. But he always got me paid, usually through the client, mm-hmm. Whatever I wrote. And we did that for, a year or something like that. Later on, I wrote stuff for him, and I got just a kind of a standard arrangement. I would get 5% of the gross. He would hire me or whatever to write for a seminar that he was doing or whatever it was. So I'd get a fee plus royalty.
Yeah, cool. And so was that the crux of your business while Gary was alive throughout your relationship, or that was just kind of one client, and then you were also doing a bunch of freelance stuff?
A bunch of freelance stuff. I worked, I moved off to Los Angeles and kind of hit the freelance scene with the help of our buddy John Carlton. He lined me up with some people in Los Angeles, and I got into the freelance scene just on my own. But I still went back and worked with Gary, mm-hmm. more so than anybody else. I did more projects with Gary over up until he passed away than I did with anybody else.
Great. Scott, could you give us like a few specific ways that Halbert influenced, your actual writing, what we see on the page?
Sure. Just as far as actually, I have a couple of notes here that I wrote down. Like I said, I learned the process from him, and I left out a part earlier when I was talking about writing a letter to Halbert. What I had done before that, and what I told him in that letter, was I had heard a tape he was on of a seminar that he did with Bill Myers in the early 90s on direct mail. And he talked about copying out sales letters in your own handwriting. And at that time, all I had was Gary's Max Money book. So I thought, well, I'll copy out, copying out anything is better than nothing. And this may have a lot to do with why Bond says, I write more like Gary than anybody else. So I copied out the entire Max Money book by hand.
Wow.
Which took quite a while. And that was probably one of the number one things I did, because not only did it make me a better writer and kind of ingrain that in me, but also, I used it as a springboard. Once I told Gary that it probably got me invited to Florida, if I were to guess.
Yeah, I would think so. It shows a lot of dedication, right? And I think anybody in a position of influence recognizes that if somebody has put that much thought and energy into what you do, is a really good chance that they have some things to teach you about your own process and about the value you're putting out into the world that you can't see yourself.
Sure. And I continued that practice of handwriting ads for maybe the first 5 years of my career. It got less and less over time, of course, because I got busier. But I would still do it for maybe 10 minutes as a warm-up, just to kind of get going, instead of just starting with a blank page or you're just cold. Yeah. It's the same as the gym. If you go in the gym, it takes a few sets of warm-ups of whatever exercise you're going to do to get going. If you went in there and just started with your working weight, well, I can tell you I've done it. It's injuries galore.
Right. Yeah, you got to warm up, loosen the muscles a little bit. So let's go back to your mention of speed, because, that's a huge issue for freelancers. I'm always fascinated with the different kind of copywriter types. I know I had a very specific type, and I had a very specific hurdle that John tried to help me overcome, and it was my never-ending Achilles, and that was that I couldn't get out that first dirty draft. And right. I think that is probably the most efficient way to write, is to just get it all out, and then writing is rewriting. But I was a relentless as I went editor, and that was always a bad habit of mine. So I'd love to hear your take on speed.
Sure. And I think I don't want to say everybody, because I can't talk for everybody, but I think most writers struggle with that issue of trying to write clean, and then, but yeah, no, what Halbert told me, and he's written about this before in his newsletter, was always the fastest writing is the best writing. And I didn't believe it. And even after I started working with him for a long time, but as I look back over my career, especially now, the stuff I wrote that was uncensored, that just came out, and I wrote, without stopping, without thinking, were oftentimes the best things, or some of the biggest hits I had. And there are tons of examples of the fastest. If you look up hit songs, number one songs, and I don't have the references, I've written about this before, but amazing number of songs were written in just 5 minutes or less. That one of them's Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville, which has been played, I forget, 1 billion times or something, nonstop since it was released. Wow. He wrote that in a bar in Austin, Texas, in about 5 minutes. Wow. So, and I didn't believe that. And that's just kind of a thing. the fastest writing is the best writing, because I think when it comes out fast, you have it down. It's in your head already.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mitch, you've kind of done your research, whether intentionally or unintentionally, to bring yourself to that moment where this thing is just bubbled up inside of you and it's just time to get it out.
Yeah, usually when you're struggling or it's really hard, I don't want to say always, but usually when you're really struggling, you either didn't do enough research, it's a knowledge gap usually, or you didn't have enough time. You didn't have enough time to pull everything in, get it in your brain, let your subconscious work on it for a day or two.
Right.
And you're struggling. And, I hate to say it, not always, but usually those are stinkers if you struggle all the way through something.
Yeah.
Not always, but that's been my experience anyway.
Yeah. I found the other pattern to having stinkers was when the writing just gets a little too good to you, artistically, and you feel like, oh yeah, oh God, I'm really nailing this. Like this, oh, this is a great philosophy to share, right? And then
you're acknowledging or your brilliance.
Yeah, right. Whenever you're feeling brilliant, you're in trouble.
I agree with that totally. I often don't feel brilliant, so it's not a big problem.
Yeah, it's usually not an issue for copywriters. I don't know. You and I have the privilege of being in a group of colleagues, the best of the best. And
sure,
I love when we all get to help each other with a piece somebody's working on, and everybody at some point, in that group is admitted, I don't know what the hell I'm doing on this one. And you would think that you become immune to that at some point, and it just isn't the case. This is why copywriting is such a fascinating industry, is because it's forever humbling.
Absolutely. I don't think it doesn't matter about years or whatever, or what you've done in the past. I mean, you can be humbled today. Oh, yeah. Unfortunately.
Yeah, it'd be nice to, I guess, get over that. But then what would the fun be? With no panic, how do we enjoy ourselves?
If you go on a long streak, a little more seriously, if you go on a long streak, because I did for about 5 years, this is recent, up to about a year and a half ago, I went on a long streak with a single client, writing nothing but winners, with the occasional or little more than occasional huge winner. The market was right. Everything was right for that. It was a good relationship, and you get complacent, and it's that's not necessarily good for you in total. It's kind of nice every once in a while to hit a hurdle or roadblock that makes you go back and say, oh man, what am I doing here, or what's going on here?
Yeah.
Because you get lazy, get mentally lazy.
Sure. Yeah. And when you're shocked out of that a little bit, it forces you to go relearn some stuff. Like most things, sports, you see this all the time. It's like, what'd you do to right the ship? Well, we just got back to the fundamentals, like in baseball, right? It's like, we decided to actually start, playing defense and getting the ball to first base faster and getting guys out. Things like that seem to really help. You know what I mean? It's like just the fundamentals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can forget. I go in and out of my writing routine sometimes, and I forget. It's like, oh yeah, that's what I used to do that worked so well. And I go back to it, and it worked as well, as it did before.
Right. It never goes away. All right, cool. Let's get to the essential question of the show here, Scott. Again, 20 years in the trenches, doing it as a living. So, never without a deadline, I'm assuming, to some degree. And it's just a constant muscle you're flexing here. So fascinated to hear your answer to this question. Scott Haines, what is the one thing you've done in your marketing that produced the most surprising results?
We do a kind of a couple, but one's real short. Being able to contact people, and I was able to get my way in, because I did a similar deal like I did with Gary, later on with Jay Abraham, and later on with other clients, and I was able to get in the door. That was surprising to me. Mm-hmm. But You know, I think I'll tell you a surprising result. When we sold, Gary had a system, stock trading system. You know, how to trade stocks every single day or whatever, something like that, and win. That's not the title. But I was involved with that for about 3 years, and we got to where we had a system. This is going back to direct mail and space advertising. We got it down to, we were able to run a 1 inch or 1 column wide 7-inch ad in the Investor's Business Daily, and it pulled in leads. Call for a free report, call our free recorded message for 24 hours, whatever. And we pulled in leads, and then we would send them a series of 3 letters. And Gary wrote one. He wrote the lead, the lead that went in IBD, Investors Business Daily, and then he wrote 1 or 2 of the letters, both of them. And people got those, and they came to me and said, "Hey, what about these people that aren't buying?" So I thought, well, what about a damage set letter? And if anybody doesn't know what a damage set letter is, it's basically you're telling people that you've got some product, it's good in every single way, but it's got some minor either cosmetic damage or something like that, and you're usually blaming it on the postman or your fulfillment house, or not in a damaging way to them, but
right.
So I thought, well, I'll do one of those, and I sat down, and these are people that responded to a space ad, were sent 1, 2, maybe they even got a 3rd letter and did not respond. And the response to that promotion was really good, by the way. The 1-inch space ad cost about $700, and every time it ran, I think it brought in something like 60 or 70,000. But here's the thing: I wrote a damage set letter for that after they refused to buy 3 times, and it brought back another 65 grand. At half off. What the deal was, I offered the thing at half off because it has cosmetic damage, and it brought back after people refused to buy 3 times, I guess.
Interesting. And so the lesson there is they wanted it, but it must have been the price holding them back.
Yeah, price. I was surprised. Everybody was surprised, because what I did is I took out the order form, and the guy that was actually running the logistics of the business, I took it out. We were at a seminar, one of Gary's seminars, and I just took out a pen and I started crossing out stuff on the order form. I said, and I wrote the new price in. I said, here you go. I go, reproduce this and just mail them the letter again, or the new letter. I actually wrote a letter to go along with it. So that was my part in the sequence of the letters. And I said, use this as the order form. And he looked at me, because he was kind of a director. He was getting into direct response. He goes, what do you mean with all this scribbling? I was like, exactly like that.
Wow.
And he hit me on that until we melded, which was interesting.
Interesting. So what was the effect you're going for there? It's like, look, this is a special deal. You can clearly see this is a result of the situation we're in. So the reason why was very evident in the look of the ad itself.
Right. And, and I wished I had it in front of me. It'll take too long to pull up right now, but that's it. It's a personal touch. It's kind of like doing margin notes, which margin notes, you'll see them online. They're just little things. They're graphics online usually. Ted Nicholas was really big in using them in direct mail very successfully. And it adds some personal touch to it. Is one of the things that it does.
Yeah.
Really you would think it was the opposite. And Dan Kennedy has a quote, something like "ugly copy works" or something like that, because it was definitely ugly. My handwriting's terrible. I used a marker trying to make it better and make it look a little better, but that was surprising. I don't know if that's the biggest lesson I've ever been surprised by, but that was one of them.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I expected to get a few. If people listen to this or take this to heart and use it, it could be very profitable.
No doubt. Yeah. Awesome. So, Scott, I want to, before we wrap up here, talk about your course because, you and I both taught John Carlton's course for many, many sessions. But I think you had your course even before John came out with the simple writing system. Is that correct?
Yes, not before he had Marketing Rebel or the Marketing Rebel initial
Right.
course, but before the simple writing system. Yes.
Awesome. So shortcut copywriting secrets. And by the way, if you're interested in Scott's program, you can go to shortcutcopywritingsecrets.com/copychief, and Scott will have a special offer for you there. I'm not an affiliate to this program. I'll just tell you, just so you know that I am not telling you about this so that I can get some cut. I'm telling you about it because I know that this is one of the premier courses in the industry, and I know Scott's work, and it's definitely one that you need to check out if you haven't already. So, Scott, just give us the brief. What's the big takeaway of the course? Because there's, when you and I started in this business, there weren't very many courses at all. So, what inspired you to create the course, and what's the one thing you feel people can get from it that they maybe can't get from other courses?
Okay. I wrote it because I wanted to go or diversify, and I wrote it in 2005, I believe. So it's been over a decade, but it all stands because it's just fundamentals mostly. But I wanted to go back into information publishing myself as a sideline to my writing for clients. The difference or what it is it's basically, I'll tell you, it's Gary's writing process put on paper all in one place. He wrote about 25, 26 newsletters about copywriting, but it was never in a row, or you have to patch them together yourself. So I sat down, and in addition to Gary, everything else I've ever learned from all the books I've read and other people, put it together from headline to PS, and that's the whole deal. It's 12 chapters and a bonus chapter, and it starts with headlines and goes through every aspect, including order forms, how to order, testimonials, how to write them, and just every aspect of a sales letter.
Awesome! Wow, cool. And so it's the kind of thing where at the end of it, you come away with the full template, all the parts of a sales letter, and exactly how to make each component really powerful.
Sure, that's exactly what it is. It's I spend the first 4 chapters on headlines alone because, as you know, they're really important.
Yeah.
And then I go from there, and it's just I think of it as Gary's system just on paper. And what I learned, of course, there's a lot about him in there. There's a lot about John in there because John I never worked with John early on, but I did later on, worked with him in a couple of seminars and some things like that. And John's been a huge influence on me. So there's a lot of wisdom from John in there that I learned. And it just takes you through the whole process. I don't want to call it a dumbed down version, but it's really clear. If I've got feedback on it, more feedback about one thing about it is it just lays out the process. Really simple. There's no mumbo jumbo. This is how it is.
That's good. People appreciate that these days more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, it may be to my detriment. I should make it the 3 squared equals E double X whatever. Charge $2,000, $3,000 for it, and make them fly across the country. But I'm not going to do that.
Give them what they need. Let them go prosper with it.
Sure.
I like that. Scott, man, thanks for doing this. This was great. I'm glad we finally made time to connect and get you down your legacy, your evolving legacy as it stands today on the old digital tape here. So really appreciate it. Again, it's shortcut copywritingsecrets.com/copychief to check out Scott's course. And if you're active enough and qualified and can get him, you could maybe even hire Scott to write for you. But it's unlikely. Scott, you're probably not entertaining many freelance offers these days, are you?
Not so much. No. but if somebody is really interested, my contact information is at the website, or it's just Scott at shortcutcopywritingsecrets.com. Send me a brief outline of what you're thinking.
Awesome.
Or looking for.
Cool, buddy. I appreciate it, and let's do it again.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin.
All right, see you after that.
All right, bye.
Hey, thanks again for listening to the Truth About Marketing podcast. If you like this show and you think other people would like this show, the best way to spread the word is by reviewing and rating the show in iTunes. Just log in, click review, leave a big old fat 5-star review, and let everybody know that you dig the show so that they can dig it too. To get all the links and resources we mentioned on today's episode, please go to copychief.com/TAM, as in Truth About Marketing. And if you'd like to learn more about how you can improve your sales copy with templates, formulas, coaching, feedback, or hiring a pro, do all that on the inside of the members area of copychief.com, and I will look for you there. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.